Kunal and Partho. Welcome to our next podcast on the sessions on Gita.
Thank you.
So, Partho, one of the topics I would like to cover today is something that is very non-intuitive to a human mind, which is the existence of time.
Existence of time.
Time, yeah. So there is we've discussed this before. We've talked about how physics can explain does time exist, how Vedanta can also explain how time exists or not, or how it's a human construct which our mind is bound by in most cases, and the past is just in our memories, as you've said, and future is just our imagination, and all that exists is the now, the eternal now, the present moment. So would love to get your thoughts on this. Why does the mind make up time and understand everything in a linear time format, and why is it not correct how our mind understands it?
It's a very complex subject, as you would know. Whether when one approaches from the physics perspective or the Vedantic one, it's as complex.
Yes.
We'll probably need to break it up into some seizable bits, at least whatever the mind conceives of it. But before we go into Vedanta or into the physics of it, let's think of the psychology of time, as you just said, about the future and the past. So a good question to start with is, how do we know? How do you and I know that there is time? So only when we remember something that has happened in the past, or we think of something that has not yet happened, but is going to happen, is likely to happen, or we want it to happen, or sometimes when we don't want it to happen. So then we sort of project the mind into a future time. So that's how we know time, isn't it?
Yes.
But if you think about it for a while, you'll see, if you reflect on this, then you'll see that it's not time at all that we're talking about. We're talking about memory and imagination, which is in a way a projection of the memory. By memory, I mean known experience. We remember of known experience, and what we project out of that known experience to a so-called unknown was how we create the flow of time, the past, the present, and the future. But really, we are not talking about time. We're talking about remembrance and projection. Yeah, would you agree with me?
Yeah.
So my question has always been, why, therefore, the necessity of talking in terms of time at all? Why should we talk in terms of time? We should talk in terms of what I remember and what I project into so-called future. Future, again, in a psychological, not a time sense, not a temporal sense, but a psychological sense. Future meaning something that has not yet happened. And the past meaning something that has happened and I remember. If I don't remember, it's not a past for me. So we have the individual, the personal remembrances, and then we have collective remembrances. And then we have recorded remembrances, history. We build narratives on that. Collective narratives, individual narratives. But in all this, I don't see any time. Or approach it in a different way. If we decide not to use the term past and present, we can still talk exactly what we are talking without any loss of meaning. Instead of saying that I met you yesterday, I can say that I remember having met you. And if you really want to make it a bit more, in terms of communication, a bit more meaningful, I would say when the sun rose yesterday, not yesterday, and I won't use the word yesterday. So that's it. That's precisely it. It becomes difficult to communicate. So I need a kind of a conventional way of communicating my remembrance. So the mind has to use this device that we call time, but it's just a device. So for a person who does not remember, there is no time. For a child, there is no time.
And arguably, they live much better, much happier, live in the moment.
Yeah, because there is no psychological memory. So they don't remember things, they're not carrying the burden of the known, and they're not projecting anything into a so-called future and then getting anxious about it or getting apprehensive about it or getting excited about it. So all that is not there, which they can probably still do without thinking in terms of time again. Imagination, you can imagine things that haven't happened, and you can still feel excited or anxious depending on what you're imagining. But it's just that imagination, projection. There's still no time as such.
How would the life change for a person if they don't have a memory, or if they don't record and store these experiences? Which, wondering if it gets better, because then you have no attachment, no baggage, you just flow like water. You're just flowing and adds in the moment.
No, but then there's also no consciousness. Then you're living more or less like an infant or an animal. So this concept of living in the moment, it sounds very romantic, but it isn't. When if you don't have remembrance and projection, a narrative, as it were, a remembrance and a continuity, you wouldn't have any consciousness, you see. Think about it. What we call consciousness is a product of what we remember and what we keep projecting out of all that we remember. That is what consciousness is. So if you don't remember anything at all and you're not projecting anything at all, there's no imagination and there's no remembrance, you don't have any consciousness. Thing happens in the moment and it's gone.
So I guess,
yeah, unless of course you come to it yogically, but then that's a different thing.
How would yogically look like, coming at it?
Then you would transcend the concept of time, of remembrance and imagination and projection without losing the consciousness.
So you retain the consciousness.
You retain the consciousness in the sense that you retain a sense of self which has built up over time. But there is a narrative which you may have to abandon at another point in your own evolution. A point where you're mature enough in spirit not to need a personal consciousness. But then that's an advanced stage, even in the yoga. But for practical purposes, if we don't have a personal consciousness, life becomes very difficult.
And what's the downside of looking at time and living?
I don't know if you have seen the movie 50 First Dates.
Yes, every day they have a new date with the same person. Yeah.
So think about the existence of the woman. The woman protagonist. It's a very pathetic kind of a life.
Yeah.
You don't have any narrative. You don't have any, consciousness.
Continuity.
You don't have any continuity. And if you were just to take away that relationship, what would you have? Just the sea and the sand and the food that you eat, and the same thing would go on over and over again. So these are questions to be thought of before we psychologically do away with time. So Krishnamurti made it much better. He often used to talk about psychological time. This is, of course, an idea from the Vedanta, that there is a practical memory and there is a psychological memory. Time is psychological memory. So if one does not let go of practical memory and at least a memory of identity, then it is possible to live without a psychological memory.
Can you explain the difference between the two, practical and psychological?
If you were to hurt me, say something hurtful to me or do something hurtful to me, I will remember that. That will remain in me and it will become a part of my consciousness. And it will then become a filter through which I experience life. Conversely, if you were to do something very good to me, make me feel very happy, I would remember that. That would become a filter, which is what happens with every experience, every relationship and experience. So with these filters, positive and negative, I build up the way I experience life. That's my personality grows around that. So many of these filters. So that's psychological memory. You have an identity. You know that you're Kunal and you represent this, and this is what you've experienced. This is what you've become. You have a personality. It's because of psychological memory. So if you do not have a psychological memory, there is no ego in you. There's no person. There is no memory of what has. There is memory, but you're not carrying any of it. This is a very fine point which we have to get. It's not that you do something to me today and I forget it. That would be a pathological case. The movie, for instance, we were talking about. So the memory will not form. Sometimes there's a defect in the brain and there's no memory formation. So that's pathological. We are not talking about that. So you say something hurtful to me or do something hurtful to me. It's not that I'll completely forget about it, but I won't carry it with me. I will leave it in the experience. So I'm not building up a psychological memory. Therefore, I'm not building up a personality. You see, because psychological memory is the basis of personality. Without this, you don't have that. So if I'm not building up or accumulating memories, I'm not building up a personality, and therefore I'm not
biased, subjective.
How can there be a bias then? There are no biases because you don't. It's not that So this happened. Yeah, I know it happened, but it's not bias. So you're not carrying the burden of experience. So that in Vedanta we call that liberation from time. Liberation from time does not mean Vedantically speaking. It does not mean that you go beyond time, because Vedantically speaking, time does not really exist. So there's nothing to go beyond. But what you do go beyond is your belief in time, that there is a past and a present and a future, and you're accumulating the past, you're known, the experiences you've had, and then you're building upon it, and then you create a sense of the self. Because remember, without psychological memory, there is no sense of self. So if you do not carry the burden of memory, there is no sense of self. There is no self then. So if there is no self, you have nothing to defend. You have nothing to preserve. You have nothing to hold like that and cling to. And that's what human beings do. The one thing that we really cling to desperately is the sense of self. That's what the ego is all about. And I'm willing to literally give up my life for that. I will kill or be killed for that. I know this is worth preserving. This is worth defending. But if I don't have a sense of self, nothing to defend, nothing to fight for, nothing to attack for, nothing to hold against you, nothing to, keep thinking of all the time in terms of I must preserve this against that. All that is gone. So that is what we mean in Vedanta when we say that you're liberated from the self, the sense of self, personality, time, memory, all that.
Yeah. So no attachment, no impressions, no sanskaras that form layers over yourself, and then
And
yeah,
it's much subtler and deeper and very difficult because the subtle is difficult to understand theoretically without having really experienced it for a while.
mm,
Like if you were to live a few days without psychological memory,
mm,
you would really lose all your relationships in life because your relationship by definition is memory of the past. It's like if I have a relation with you, this relationship is a construct of all that we have experienced in the past, that I have experienced of you and that you have projected to me in terms of what I want from you, what I get from you, what I do not get from you, all that put together. That's psychological memory.
yeah,
And on that, our relationship is based. You know? So if I don't have any of that, then each time I meet you, you are an eternal being. And it doesn't matter to me where you are at in the curve of your evolution because I will not see you in a single frame of in a single frame of reference because
yeah,
I know that what was yesterday is not today and what is today is not going to be tomorrow because that yesterday, today, tomorrow concept is gone. So you are what you are. How does it matter what you did yesterday or what you did not do yesterday? And how does it matter what you're going to do tomorrow and what you're not going to do tomorrow? So I'm liberated from a whole lot of
baggage,
baggage. Yes,
attachment.
that's the word. A whole lot of baggage that we carry about people, about relationships, and it's so much of our social and psychological baggage that comes out of it. This whole question of be truthful, be trustful, be trustworthy. You have to be trustworthy, and you cannot betray. And I must learn to trust, and personal guarantees and assurances, and will you be my friend for all time? All that is gone. I mean, today you're here. That's friendship. Tomorrow you may not be here. There's no friendship. It's okay. So when we say that you're flowing, that is what we mean. We're flowing. That you do not carry time. You cannot carry memory. Or as I like to say, the burden of experience.
But if we take away the burden of experience, that's arguably what the life is about. Just these conscious experiences that we have, and then we move on with them. Of course, there is a downside to it that it brings a burden, but maybe it brings also life itself.
What the how? What does it bring?
So, as an example, you're talking about our relationship. Let's say I look up to you as my mitracharya. Um, and if every time I look at you as just a being who's come for a moment and not carry any of the past.
So why do you look upon me as mitracharya? Because you learn something when
Yeah.
something that is important for you,
Yeah.
for your inner growth and understanding. Now, I can always do that with you without being anything to you. Why do I need to be a friend and a teacher? Why? So what I'm saying is the teaching does not get affected. Every time we sit together, we can discuss, we can talk, you can ask questions, I can explain, whatever. I mean, verbally, if we have gone beyond verbal, then we can have all that. And then you go your way, I go my way, and that's gone. Now, whether I come back tomorrow or not, you're not carrying that I must meet him tomorrow. That's not there because you're now concentrated on living what you have, not on remembering what I've said, but on living what you have understood, what you've assimilated. So when you're completely absorbed in the living, you don't think about what somebody said and what happened. All that is gone because you're so into what we call the living of the moment. So I come back to you after I come back to you tomorrow and we resume where we left off. Do I need to be a friend and a teacher to you? That's the question. Because the moment you call me a friend or a teacher, you put it into time.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is we don't need to be anything to each other. We just need to be. And this applies to all relationships on earth. And it will be a very liberating. When I used to do a lot of counseling work with couples, I used to see it so clearly that all their suffering is because they're carrying the burden of experience and time, and memories lead to expectations. Expectations lead to disappointment and hurt. Whereas if two people live together without time, without memory, it's so blissfully liberating. For children, think about children growing up with parents who don't have this concept of time.
But this is
So what I'm saying is, what do we lose? And what is time bringing to us? It's bringing, people say that, with time we grow wiser. My question is, we don't grow wiser. We grow more conditioned.
conditioned. Yeah.
That's not wisdom.
Hmm.
Wisdom, you want to grow wiser? I see you today, and the mind is so clear and so transparent, so without filters, that it connects with the deepest part of you. It connects to your depths. And I know who you are and what you are in that moment without any memory. I don't need memory for that. I can sense you what you are right now. And when I meet you again, I will sense you what you're then. May or may not be what you are now, but what you're then. So I'm sensing the real you, moment to moment. So I don't need to have any experience of you or of life itself. Oh, if you do this, this will happen in life. So you get conditioned by that experience. How do you know that is going to happen in life? Something entirely different may happen, but it won't, because my filter is so strong. My expectation that what I have experienced will happen is so strong that that is exactly what happens. And that's called patterning of the mind and the brain. So we get patterned, we get conditioned. But think about it. If you don't have any of it, what are you missing?
Just thinking through this as an example, there are 8 billion people on the planet. I don't think I'm seeing you, let's say, every week, or we are meeting up every day, every week, every month, whatever frequency. I don't think, if I don't have the impression of you, the baggage, the experience, the learning and friend and whatever titles and conditioning I'm putting around it, I may or may not meet you again.
You may.
I may or may not meet you again, because there are 8 billion people to meet from, right? Probably, if I don't remember you, I will not look forward to plan the next.
Saying you will not remember me. When you see me, you will.
But you're saying, okay, just don't subjectify it.
You recognize me physically, but that will not in any way be determined by what you remember of me. See, the Partho that you know
Yeah,
belongs to the past already.
correct.
The Partho that is in the moment, you can never know. You can. If you're so quiet, so silent, and living so much in your depths that you connect immediately to the Partho that is now. So when you connect to the Partho that is now, the Partho that was then does not matter to you. How does it matter to you? And think about it in all things. Except for, again, let's not mix up between practical and psychological memory. So practical memory in its own place. I mean, you do, you have algorithm, you work with algorithm software, right?
Yes.
You're a software person. So you need to remember your software. So that's practical. You need to remember practical details of your life. But psychological memory, what this experience has done to me, you don't need that. No experience does anything to you. Think about that. No experience does anything to you. You don't need that psychological memory. You don't need that burden of, that fire burns me. Burnt you once. How do you know the fire will always burn you? I'm giving a extreme example. Of course, fire will burn you.
Of course.
But let that not become a distorting patterning in you. You may discover something completely different about fire. Of course, because it's gone into your neurological memory, the heat and fire, you will not put your hand in again. That is for sure. No kid who burns himself or herself once puts his or her finger to the fire again. That is the practical level. But there should be no fear around fire or around it. I'm just giving an example. So the narrative that we build around everything in this life is because of the burden of experiences we carry. You don't need a narrative for anything. So what I'm saying, Kunal, is that we don't need a psychological memory. We don't need memory of relationships or of people or of events. And we don't grow wiser by these things. We only grow more and more rigid by these things. We become more and more of persons by these things. But take it all away, you lose nothing. You become, in fact, you gain tremendously. You become intense,
More open.
more vulnerable, more living, more here and now, and more open to experience, to people, to everything, because there are no filters in your mind.
Yeah. An example comes to me to elaborate this a little further. So, as you said, what if I were to hurt you, and if you were to carry that with you, that he's hurt me, and you'll have some sort of bias in. So, in hurting, as an example, if I were to pinch you with a pin,
It's physical hurt.
physical hurt, I pinch you with a pin.
Yes.
That will give your brain quickly a reaction, which is pain, that you felt the pain. But now from that moment onwards, what you carry of that pain is gone. Pain is taken out. Your mind imagining the pain
Yeah.
will lead to suffering.
That's precisely what I mean by saying a conditioning has happened.
Correct.
A patterning has happened.
And that is the suffering which hurts most humans for most parts of their lives, because they are carrying those.
So it's not the pain that hurts.
Yeah, it's not the memory of the pain.
And
correct.
what you're projecting out of that memory.
Yes.
See, there are two things that human beings do to themselves. So they remember, and then they project out of the remembrance. So you remember, and then you project out of what you remember. And that's how we create our narrative. That's how we create everything that we suffer in this life. The web of suffering is actually the web of remembering. So I feel a physical pain. Fine. So now, if I don't remember, it's fine. It's physical pain. But if I don't have the memory of physical pain, if I'm not carrying that burden,
Yeah, there's no suffering.
I'm much more open to the experience of what I have been conditioned to call pain. Think about that.
Yeah.
If, as a kid, I feel so-called physical pain, and the adults around me don't condition me by saying that is pain and that is not good and you must avoid that. Instead of that, they say that go into the experience, see what you're feeling, experience the sensation. No, let it be there, expand it. You will actually experience what you have called pain in a completely different way. And it, ironically or miraculously, that experience of pain will not be painful.
There's no suffering now.
It will be transformed.
Yeah.
And you will transform your way of living on earth through every experience. Only if you get out of this burden of time and memory. So yeah, what I'm saying is you don't need it. It's just, that's why I call it burden. It's baggage. Is that something that I'm carrying around? And because I have grown up with adults who are doing the same thing themselves, and no one is enlightened enough to sit me down and tell me, hey, listen, you know what? You don't need that baggage. We don't need any bandage. So when the yogis say life is now, this is what they mean. They're not talking about some kind of an abstract state of being where there is no consciousness and you don't remember anything at all. And they're not talking about something like that. That's abstract. What they're talking about is a very real, concrete experience of living so deeply in the experience that experience doesn't accumulate. If you think about it, if you live this experience very intensely and deeply, will you be carrying any other experience? Will you be carrying the experience of the last hour? Will you carry? Will you remember?
I don't think I'd have to.
because you'll be so intensely absorbed in the here and now,
Yeah.
living this, that you cannot carry memory, you cannot be projecting. And if you're doing it all the time as habit, your memory will dissolve by itself. People often ask me how, I understand what you're saying, that we must not remember, but how to not remember?
Just live the moment.
No, you cannot
Live the moment.
unremember what you. So go so deep into your present experience that all your neural pathways that are the accumulation of memory is burnt out. The experience of the here and now should be so intense, so total, so complete
Hmm.
that your neural pathways burn out.
Yeah.
Everything just, nothing forms. You're just living from now. You can't even say now to now, because now is endless.
Say eternal now.
It's eternal now.
As you said.
So everything else
Yeah.
is burnt out in that intensity of being. That is what Vedantis mean when they use this phrase, intensity of being.
Hmm.
But the moment you remember and you project, you are dissipating your intensity. You're dulling yourself. So the way we live our lives, it makes us dull. We dumb ourselves down.
If I were to try and simplify this to one more level for our audience, one of the thoughts that's coming to me is, which I've heard somewhere. They said when the humans appeared on the planet, they were nowhere. They didn't know where they were. After some time, they got somewhere. They started belonging and understanding that this is a tree I live under, this is the water I get, this is etc. This is a jungle I live around. Then they evolved to today's world where now they could be everywhere. You could be digitally and otherwise connected and almost be anywhere. But the problem that the baggage and the memory and non-intense living of the moment brings is the following: that you're always elsewhere. You're not here right now. And that's how we live our lives, unfortunately, that I'm right now thinking, okay, in 30 minutes a podcast will end, in 1 hour some guest will come,
Something
and then
will happen. That's projection.
and exactly,
We're always projecting into the next.
the next. And so that is not living non-intense current moment experiencing, where if I'm in the beach, I'm on the beach. Rather than being on the beach, I'm thinking, oh, wish you were here, wish I was there. This is all just complicating and making things dull, bad of the current experience.
Yes. And also think about this, Kunal, that our whole this whole idea of being somewhere
Yeah,
is itself memory.
correct.
If you're not living in memory, if you're in the experience, in what we are calling the eternal now, there is no place. Where are you? You will say, I'm in Chandigarh. But that's nothing. Chandigarh is something you remember.
Yeah,
Does it really exist? No, it's just a name, a device.
yeah.
So when you live very intensely in the eternal now, there is place. So saying that I'm everywhere, or I'm here or there or everywhere, itself makes no sense. And this is very important for us to understand. It's not that we are here or there or everywhere. Actually, the only place we are is here.
Now,
Wherever you are, it's here.
so there's no space and time, as they say. The space and time both are the myths.
Absolutely. Because here is the only place you can be. Where else can you be but here? Now, whatever name you give to here. But really, here is all that there is. And the best thing about here is it cannot be described. How do you describe here? Describe here. You will describe it in terms of what you see and touch. These walls and the house. And these are all constructs. I take it all away and I ask you to describe here. You will not be able to describe here. And you will not be able to describe now. So here and now, both are indescribable experiences. In that sense, we say these are transcendental experiences. So you can have transcendental experiences right now and here. If only we free the mind from its
Attachments, identifications, baggages.
identity baggage with memory and imagination and expectations and desires, and all that.
Yeah, Partho.
The dull way of living. I see it as, when you live a very dull existence, you have desires and fears and expectations and anxieties. That's a very dull way of living.
Hmm.
But if you live intensely with and a lot of joy, all this is gone.
Joy, love.
Yeah, I mean, then love itself becomes something abstract. And what is love? In the here and now, there is no love.
Hmm.
Is there? What is love? It's something.
It's an emotion. Yeah.
It's if I'm with you and we are having a very intense experience, whatever that experience may be, there is an intensity we feel. Yes, no. Any of us can feel that intensity anytime, anywhere. Now, that intensity quickens our life. It expands the being and quickens the existence. That quickening is bringing more energy into ourselves. It's bliss, releasing a bit of bliss. Yeah, the only word I can use is intensity.
Hmm.
Now, that is the here and now. You can't describe it. And then let's say you come back to normal, the dull way of existence, and then you think about that intensity. Now you have got to give it a name, got to give it a label in order to make it real to yourself, because your mind and brain is very dull. All of us have very dull brains and minds, so we can't catch life as it's happening. We need to
Categorize it. Yeah.
ossify it
Yeah.
in names and labels. So we call it love. So love is twice removed from the real thing which you cannot display. But that you experience as pure intensity.
Hmm.
It's beyond the physical, beyond the emotional, vital, beyond beyond the mind and its intellect, beyond morals, beyond civilization itself. It's primeval. It's eternal, and it makes a difference to you. And then it's gone. You can't keep it. The intensity cannot be kept. It's gone. And then that intensity you have to assimilate till the next intensity comes. So if we learn to live from intensity to intensity, see how your life will be, your physical being will be transformed. Your cells will be transformed.
Hmm.
So liberating oneself from the concept of time and memory goes very deep down. It leads, to my mind, if you ask me, it leads directly to actual transformation of the cells.
Yeah. And the best times in our lives had been when we lost sense of space and time, when we didn't know where we were. We were playing, we were dancing, we were as kids, we were doing things in which we were just flowing and having the intense experiences, as you're saying.
And what you remember of your life, the real remembrance,
Yeah.
it's always of the intensities. Because that you don't really remember. They become part of your being. You're assimilated. So we have to learn to think in terms of what's memory and what has been assimilated, what you have become. And there's a huge difference. Memory is external. You can remember in terms of objective experience, so no. But what you've become, what you've so deeply assimilated that you've become that you cannot experience externally or objectively, because you've become that. So when we say you have to become the infinite, you have to become the eternal, you have to become that, this is what we mean.
Very intense discussion, Partho, and good intense outcome. That's how to live in the moment and let go of space and time and everything else. But beautifully described, lots of takeaways. I hope our audience who's watching would benefit from this and hopefully live more and more intense and expand in consciousness as we all aspire to. So that's great, Partho.
Thank you.
Thank you. And